People on the right, conservatives, to use the term broadly and generally, will condemn violence that comes from other conservatives or right-wing extremists. There's a long pattern of it going back decades. People on the left refuse to condemn violence that comes from the left, especially the far left. And they pretend that the violence coming from the left is somehow irrelevant, despite the fact that it's far more frequent than the violence coming from the right. The difference is the violence from the left tends to be less lethal. Well, provably it is less lethal. Until the left will condemn the violence on its own side, the right will have no choice but to assume that that's what the left wants, is more violence. So that's probably what people are going to get. I say this because if we can't be honest about objective reality, then there really can be no unity. The right will be forced to prepare for continuing and escalating left-wing violence, and the left will continue to rally itself into more violence as it just focuses on the violence from the right. And without acknowledging their own part in it, there can be no bridging of the gap between moderate left and right people. A moderate conservative who's willing to talk about common sense gun laws or mental health issues as it pertains to mass violence or violence in general is talking to a brick wall if they're talking to a leftist, because the leftist will just shut them down and ignore objective reality, which is the violence coming from the left. This is the new Civil War. If you're not prepared, you're probably in trouble. You need to be prepared for the fact that the left will continue to condone and call for more violence from the left while complaining about the violence from the right. We will see increasing lethality of violence from the left, with more and more instances like the ICE firebomber and the Dayton shooter. At some point, the lethality will match somewhat the lethality of the right. Of course, it's generally believed that right-wing individuals are more experienced and more capable with firearms, tend to have more experience in the military or police, that kind of stuff. So it's kind of a meme on the right that any leftist uprising in the form of violence would be quickly quashed. And I do believe that to be fairly true, although the initial onset of violence might be very disruptive and deadly. However, most of these Democratic Socialists and Socialist Rifle Association members don't stand a chance against the average operator or veteran ex-operator, or even your average country boy used to bringing down deer and ducks. So I'd like to say that the calm nature of the average conservative or Second Amendment proponent or libertarian may win the day over the hysterical and hypocritical rhetoric coming from the left. But that would only be true if the media wasn't helping to compound the issue. The media will only focus on violence from the right and will continue to stir up support for violence from their base on the left. The bottom line is increased violence on both sides. As the left increases the frequency of attacks, the right will have to increase the nature of their preparedness and their response to constantly being targeted by leftists, to the point where moderate conservatives who have never called or even spoken about violence will be thinking about it every day. The fact that they need to protect themselves every time they go to the grocery store, every time they go out to dinner, every time they go to work, if they're walking their dog. Are you wearing a red hat? You're probably going to get a brick thrown at you. Do you have a Trump bumper sticker on your car? You're probably going to get a milkshake thrown at you, or somebody run up and try to punch you. It seems like the Marxist insurgency is being very successful at creating division in our country. And I assume that the end goal is literally just to cause violence and destroy infrastructure to reduce the economic prowess of the United States, so that Marxists can point to the decline of capitalism or some other nonsense. I firmly believe that the communists have been infiltrating our government at federal, state, and local levels since the 60s. It seems pretty obvious when you take a step back and you look at all the changes in our society and how well they dovetail with Marxist ideology and some of the plans that came out of the 60s and 70s in terms of how the Marxists intended to attack the United States. I don't think there's an easy solution. And I think for sane people, moderates on the left and the right, the only thing to do is to be aware that violence is escalating and prepare accordingly. Good luck.